One minute you feel clear about the relationship, and the next minute your brain is replaying something that they said. You analyze the timeline, you revisit conversations, you suddenly notice another manipulation tactic. And just when you think you finally figured it out, your mind goes right back to it again, even when you don't want it to. This is not random. Your brain is actually stuck in something called a rumination loop. And once you see how that loop works, the whole experience starts to make a lot more sense. After leaving a toxic or manipulating relationship, many people find themselves doing things like replaying conversations, reconstructing timelines, analyzing behavior, researching narcissism or grooming, trying to figure out what actually happened. Their mind keeps returning to the relationship, even when they know the relationship was not healthy, even when they wish their mind would just let it go. And because of that, many people start assuming something about themselves. They think, why am I still thinking about this? Why can't I just let this go? Why does my brain keep going back to it? But what's actually happening here is something very different. Most people assume this means that they are obsessing or overthinking, but rumination has a very specific function. Your brain is trying to solve something that never fully made sense. And until that contradiction stabilizes internally, your mind keeps returning to it. So what exactly is rumination? Rumination is a psychological process where the brain repeatedly revisits an experience in an attempt to make sense of it. It's essentially a problem-solving loop. Your brain is trying to organize information that doesn't fully make sense yet. In normal situations, this happens quickly. Something happens, you understand it, and then your mind moves on. But when an experience doesn't fully make sense, the brain doesn't file it away so easily. Instead, it keeps returning to it, trying to organize the story, trying to resolve what happened. That's what rumination actually is. Here's the important reframe, because this is something many people misunderstand. Rumination is often talked about like it's a bad thing, like it means that you're obsessing, that you're stuck, that you're an overthinker. But rumination is actually a very intelligent response from your brain. It's your mind trying to help you make sense of something that never fully made sense while it was happening. Your brain is essentially saying, something about this experience does not add up yet. Something here feels off. So it keeps returning to it, trying to organize the pieces until the story finally becomes clear. Why does this matter? This is something so important to understand. The goal is not to simply just get rid of rumination, because rumination is actually pointing you to something. Your mind is signaling that something about the experience, that relationship, does not add up. Something about the story still feels unresolved. So the brain will keep returning to it, not to torture you, but to try and restore your clarity. In other words, rumination is your mind trying to help your system finally settle. Because when an experience truly makes sense internally, the brain will naturally let it go. But when something still feels inconsistent or confusing, your mind keeps returning to it until the story becomes coherent. This is exactly why rumination is so common after toxic or manipulative relationships, because these relationships often contain many contradictory experiences. For example, someone tells you they care about you, but then repeatedly hurts you. Someone apologizes, but the behavior continues. Someone denies something that you clearly remember happening. And when the brain encounters contradictions like that, it creates something psychologists call cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance happens when your brain is trying to hold two realities that do not fit together. For example, this person loves me and this person keeps hurting me. Those two things don't logically fit together, but the brain doesn't like holding two conflicting beliefs at the same time, so it tries to resolve the contradiction. It naturally tries to make those two realities fit together because the brain wants your understanding of what happened to feel internally consistent. So it starts asking questions like, did I misunderstand what happened? Was that manipulation? Did they mean something different? Was I overreacting or being too sensitive? Your brain starts trying to reconstruct the relationship. Because until those two realities make sense together, your system doesn't fully feel settled. When the brain encounters this kind of contradiction, it automatically starts trying to organize the experience into a coherent story, because the brain is constantly trying to answer one very important question: what actually happened here? It wants the story of the relationship to make sense. It wants the timeline to be clear. It wants the behavior to add up. But when the experience involved manipulation, gaslighting, or emotional inconsistency, those pieces don't easily fit together. So the brain keeps returning to the same memories, trying to reorganize them, trying to make the story finally hold together. How the rumination loop forms. This is where the rumination loop begins. Your brain starts replaying information, replaying conversations, reconstructing timelines, reviewing behavior, looking for patterns, trying to find the missing piece that finally explains everything. Every time you revisit a memory, your brain thinks, maybe this time it will finally make sense. But if the contradiction still doesn't resolve, the brain starts the process again, replaying, analyzing, reconstructing, looking for patterns, trying to organize the story. And that's when rumination becomes a loop. Your mind keeps returning to the same moments again and again, the moments where something didn't add up. Not because you wanted to stay stuck in the relationship, but because your brain is still trying to restore that clarity. This is why the brain often replays specific moments over and over. Not the entire relationship, just certain interactions. A conversation that didn't make sense, a moment when something felt wrong but you ignored it, a time when your perception was dismissed or denied. Your brain keeps returning to those moments because they contain unresolved information. Because until your brain can create a stable understanding of what happened, it keeps searching. So here's the important reframe. You're not stuck on the person. Your brain is trying to stabilize reality. It's trying to rebuild a clear picture of what actually happened. And that process is extremely common after relationships where your perception was constantly being destabilized, which is why so many people experience this rumination loop. This is why narcissistic or toxic relationships create so much confusion afterward, because many of the experiences in those specific relationships never actually line up. The behavior contradicts the words. The apologies contradict the actions. What you experience contradicts what you were told happened. So your brain keeps trying to reconcile things that were never internally consistent to begin with and never will be. And until your mind can create a clear understanding of what actually happened, the rumination continues. And this is also why simply trying to move on or stop thinking about it does not work, because your mind is not trying to hold on to the relationship. It is trying to restore that clarity. And if this is something you're experiencing, I'm hosting a free live masterclass where I walk through the deeper process of how clarity and self-trust actually gets restored after toxic relationships so that mental loop can finally start to settle. You can register at calliesorensen.com/masterclass or use the link below. If your brain keeps replaying the relationship like this, it doesn't mean you're weak or crazy. It doesn't mean you're obsessing. It means your mind is trying to solve something that never fully made sense. It's trying to restore a stable understanding of reality. And until that internal clarity returns, the brain keeps returning to the relationship. But here's where many people accidentally make the rumination loop worse. When people realize they're stuck in this loop, they assume the solution is more understanding. So they start researching. They watch more videos about narcissism. They analyze the relationship even more. They try to get a label or a diagnosis. But that strategy often keeps the loop alive. And that's what we're going to look at in the next video. Why researching narcissism, manipulation, and all the red flags can actually keep the rumination going much longer. Make sure you click the video on your screen to watch that next.